Okay, my name is Lawrence McGlynn, and you're listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM Tonight on the program, we'll discuss the federal government shutdown. Denise Clay Murray and Lance Haver will both have consumer stories to discuss. And Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm good. Just wondering how people who are already dealing with the state shutdown and now going to have to deal with this federal shutdown and how that's going to impact Pennsylvanians in particular, because we still don't have a budget.
Yep. And Lance, how are you this evening?
I'm all right, and I'm with Denise. This is kind of like perhaps the end of government, right?
Yeah.
We can't pass a state government. We can't pass a federal government. We did manage to pass a city government budget, but that seems to be it.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue for what I want to discuss right now. Before we get into any of that, just before we came on the air today, we obtained the home plan proposed budget. The home plan is, let me bring up my slideshow here. Oh, there it is. Denise did it. Thank you. So the home plan is the Housing Opportunities Made Easy plan. This is the $800 million plan that Mayor Sherrell Parker brought before City Council. A lot of debate and discussion about it. A lot of unanswered questions from those spring hearings. The plan eventually went through, and one of the stipulations that was put in there is that the mayor will have to provide periodic reports to City Council about how the money is being spent. And we have a copy of that report. This has not been made public yet, but we're well liked, so we were given a copy. So what I'd like to do is we haven't had a lot of time to go through the entire thing yet. So what I'm going to do tonight is show everybody the top 5 budget line items and explain them. And then we will have the rest of this report when we're able to break it down in our newsletter this weekend. So everybody will be able to see it and get an understanding of what's in it. So we'll just start with the first 5 things tonight. And if we can get that next slide, where do I do it? There it is. Okay. So the overall budget for 2025 and 2026 will be just short of $200 million, $197,597,280. All of that money is going to go into multiple programs in varying amounts. And so, like I said, I'm going to give you the top 5 right now. So the first one is let me bring up my slides because I can't see it. It's too small. The new way we're doing things here. So the biggest tranche of this money is going to the Affordable Housing Preservation Funds. So 37.5 million of this almost 200 million. So this program shall include the provision of gap financing, i.e. financing including short to medium term loans to address timing considerations or longer term financing to complete the capital stack for our project financed predominantly from other sources, to developers for renovation, acquisition of property, and other expenditures for housing preservation products. So the idea here is, when we first started this, to me, it seemed like they were looking for 30,000 new units. And then it kind of became 30,000 new or preserved units. And again, that definition of what constitutes preserved is still kind of out there. So you're seeing a large chunk of money going towards preserving housing.
And who actually gets the money?
Well, that's a great question, Lance. That's another thing we have to dig into. The next section here is the 34.7 million for basic systems home repair. This program shall provide free home repairs, which may be delivered pursuant to grant or other arrangements to correct electrical, plumbing, heating, limited structural, and carpentry and roofing emergencies. Eligible grant recipients shall be homeowners with income up to 100% of AMI and in owner-occupied homes which are eligible according to BSRP's existing criteria. So this program already exists. It's going to get some more money, which is a good thing. This is a good program, and it does some good. But again, to Lance's question, well, who's going to be doing all this?
And how long is the wait for the system to actually work?
My understanding is the wait is extensive.
Oh, when I was working for the city, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
We had two pots. One was for small repairs and one was for major repairs. And when people applied for a small roof leak, we knew automatically that by the time we got around to talking to them, they were going to have a major roof leak.
Yeah.
So one of the things is, are they going to staff up?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it going to remain one of these things that sounds great, but doesn't actually work very well?
And there were some questions about that too during the hearings. Do you have enough people to handle this as of now? Well, are you going to get more people? Well, we'll see. So again, really important questions. $25 million for the One Philly Mortgage Program. This program shall partner with local and regional lending institutions to provide purchasers and owners of residential housing 30-year fixed-rate loans with reduced down payments and very low or below market interest rates by utilizing loan loss reserves and by buying down interest rates or points. This program is intended to remove the need for private mortgage insurance, PMI, for participating borrowers. The next one.
Well, before we go on, let's talk a little bit about PMI, because I'm not sure how many of our viewers understand what this is. Now, PMI is one of those strange things that if you're a banker or a bondholder, you get to make all the rules. So when most of us go to get a mortgage, we put down 5% if we're vets, 10% for most of us. But the mortgage companies, even though they go through the whole application process, say, well, we still don't trust you. So not only are you going to have to put down 10%, not only are you going to have to pay a significant interest rate, we're going to make you buy insurance to cover the mortgage. And that's PMI, private mortgage insurance. Now, if you're fortunate enough to be able to put down 25% or more as a down payment, well, automatically then you don't have to buy private mortgage insurance, because the mortgage company says, well, there's enough money invested in the home that we're not worried about losing anything. So this is a great scam if you're a mortgage company. You get to charge the application fees, you get to set the interest rate, and then you get to tell the person, well, by the way, even though you paid for the application, even though you're paying the interest rate, we're going to force you to take out insurance so that if something goes wrong, we don't have any risk. And this is one of these great programs from the city that's trying to address that. It's trying to make it a more equitable world where not only do wealthy people not have to pay PMI, private mortgage insurance, but regular rank and file people don't have to pay it either.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my question is, if you don't have stellar credit, what does this mean for you? Did they say anything in what you read about people with less than perfect credit?
I haven't seen anything like that in here yet.
Okay.
And I don't see it, but if it does come up, we will put it in the newsletter.
Okay. Because let's face it, the people who could benefit most from this are people who probably don't have terrific credit because they don't have terrific jobs that allow them to pay, for that don't, their ends don't always meet.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see if the city takes that into consideration here, as part of this program.
Yeah. Next one is affordable housing production funds. Now, this is an interesting component here. It's almost $20 million. But again, in the beginning, it seemed to me that most of this was going to be towards building new housing stock. That was my interpretation. And then you see when we get to the production funds, it's fourth on the list. Almost 20 million. Again, $20 million, decent amount of money. So this program may similarly provide gap financing for construction, reconstruction, acquisition of property, and other expenditures for housing production projects. So this money will work through these next things I'm going to mention. low-income housing tax credit projects, affordable rental and special needs housing development, housing opportunities fund, increased rental affordability, and land bank grants. So that is what that 20 million looks to be going towards. And again, we're going to get more information about that moving forward. And then the last component, the fifth largest component, and this is a good program, the eviction diversion program, $15 million. This program shall offer resources for landlords and tenants in residential rental properties to resolve disputes. Funds under this program may be used to pay limited amounts of back rent and future rent as part of the resolution. This program is intended to enable such parties to avoid costly or prolonged court proceedings. So those are the top 5 budget items in this report. We're going to have a lot more information about this as we go forward. Like I said, we really just got this afternoon. So we didn't have a lot of time to really dig through it, but we pulled some of the bigger items out, and we're going to have more information about this coming week. Okay.
Now, I wonder if because I wonder if the money that you talked about in the first slide, the entire budget, this $197,597,280, is that for every year of the home program?
So this will be for 2025, which is almost over at this point.
Mm-hmm.
The way I'm reading this is these are the expenditures really for 2026.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these programs that we talked about are going to get this infusion of cash over the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, what it doesn't say in here is when the budget or when the bond issuance was made, if it has been made yet. No one seemed to know when I was asking people about that. So, but that's where it is right now. So at least we have some information about where the money is headed. As for how these programs will be brought to scale, how the programs will be adapted, we don't have a lot of information on that right now. And hopefully, like I said, I'll be digging that up this week, into next week if I can, to try to find out more about this. But at least we have a better picture of what the funds are going to be used for. So that's what we got right now. So,
but no one knows if the bonds have been issued yet, and yet there's a budget?
Yeah, no one told me. So now to have the budget before you issue the bonds, that's okay. Because I would have rather seen this budget months ago before they put the bonds out. Because I would want to know, what are you going to spend the money? Like if I was a member of council, I'd want to say, well, where's the money going before I give my okay for you taking $200 million, So, but that's where we are. And like I said, we're going to do more digging on this and find more information. All right. Okay. So now, Denise, we published a column in the Hall Monitor newsletter today that you wrote. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things that I've had to do over the years, because it's just cheaper to do this, is cook a lot of my own food. And because of that, you have to go to the grocery store. And there used to be a time where I could go to the grocery store for me and Hall Monitor sports contributor Chris Murray and take $100, and I could come out with just about everything you could possibly need for at least 2 weeks worth of meals. The last time I went to the grocery store, however, was a different story. I make it a point not to necessarily buy name brand stuff unless it's on sale. I usually go with the store brand.
Me too.
I try not to, I try not to buy I try not to buy a whole lot of stuff that I know we're not going to eat. And, I also try to keep the amount of processed food I purchase down. I go to the grocery store and I had all of my stuff and I thought, oh, okay, this couldn't cost more than like $100, maybe $125 max. I had to put stuff back.
Yeah.
Because this grocery bill was, it if I had paid for everything that I had bought, I'd have spent I'd have spent over $200. And literally before I came on the air today, I just got back from the grocery store and it cost me $200.
Yeah.
Luckily I had it, but I'm sitting there and I'm looking at what I bought and I'm like, for $200, this isn't much. And then I started looking at the bill itself. Like, there used to be a time you would never get coupons for red and green peppers. But things have gotten so ridiculously high now that they're offering 75-cent off coupons for peppers.
Yeah.
And, even with that, you had like eggs. Eggs are not as high as they used to be, but I paid almost $4 for a carton of eggs. And if I had gotten the jumbo eggs, I'd have paid more than $4. The only reason I didn't pay, $5 for a thing of butter is because butter was on sale.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if I'm having trouble figuring out what to cook, and I'm in a 2-income household where, we do things together and we have the money to pay for things, what happens if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily have a two incomes, or if you're a federal worker right now and you just found out that check that you were usually expecting on the first of the month, it's not coming because the government shut down. And yet you've got 2 or 3 hungry kids that are going to need something to eat, and your refrigerator doesn't have what you need.
Yeah.
But as part of, looking at my grocery bill and screening, I decided to look at the Consumer Price Index. And the Consumer Price Index shows that for the current period, food prices have gone up to 29% more than what they were before the COVID-19 pandemic. And between July and August, you had the highest increase in food prices in years. And that's national statistics. The greater Philadelphia area didn't do much better in that account. We were still close to a 5% increase in July and August in terms of how much food costs. And there are several reasons for that. I was reading, some economic journals, and there's several reasons for that. One, the supply chain that was, thrown into disarray by COVID is still kind of in disarray. And because of that, there are certain things that you can't find right away. For example, Chris likes peanut M&Ms. I've been looking for peanut M&Ms that were not in a big bag or, the bags for Halloween. I've been looking for just like little boxes of peanut M&Ms for weeks and have not been able to find them at the grocery store. While egg prices have gone down, there was once a time where a carton of eggs was going to cost you $6. That was due to a bird flu outbreak in Texas. That has been brought under control since, and egg prices have gone down some. But like I said, I spent nearly $4 for a carton of eggs today. Then there's the fact that America elected a playground bully president of the United States. And sometimes when you elect a playground bully president of the United States, he slaps tariffs on everything. And I mean, just today, more tariffs were announced from the Trump administration. Things he intends to slap tariffs on include, and I'm not kidding, movies produced outside of the United States, which means that all of the TV shows and things that people watch that are actually produced in Canada, it's going to cost more for them to be brought into the United States. And another thing that's causing this increase. And this is, you know, my personal experience from living in the garden part of the Garden State is that when you go to the cranberry bogs or you go to the blueberry fields or you go to any of the farms in the Garden State, you don't see a lot of native born Americans there. And unfortunately, the people who were, you know, doing that farming have either left because they're afraid of getting snatched off the street, put into a truck, and deported to somewhere that is not their home, or they have been snatched off the street and deported to a place that is not their home. In any case, they're not there to harvest the vegetables or to harvest the fruit. And you have a lot of places where fruit and vegetables are actually dying because
Yeah.
no one is there to pick them. And also in terms of the tariffs, while only 15% of American food is actually imported according to the USDA, some of the stuff that we do import is stuff that's used on American tables a lot, like sugar, like certain types of fruit. There are certain things that America doesn't necessarily grow or produce itself. And those things come from other countries. And when you get tariffs slapped on them, those things become more expensive. So what to do about that? Everyone's becoming a lot more cost conscious. I know I am. I look at the price tag of everything before I take it off the shelf. And there was one more thing I forgot to mention: climate change. And this was, you know, exemplified when I decided I make a lot of like spaghetti and meat sauce. So I went to grab some hamburger. Hamburger was only $6 the last time I went to the grocery store. It was almost $9 today. And part of that is because there were severe droughts in the western part of the country. And because of that, people that couldn't afford to continue to feed their cattle instead sold them. Now the drought has calmed down some, but the production of cattle has not gone back up to previous levels. So you have to figure climate change into this, like hurricanes in Florida, mudslides in California. In some cases, man-made disasters that turned into natural disasters like the wildfires. All of those things impact how much your food costs. Even the cost of gas, which went up when Russia attacked the Ukraine. The cost of gas went up. How does most food get to your supermarket? By 18-wheel trucks. What do 18-wheel trucks use a lot of? Gas. So it's all interconnected. And because of that, consumers have to be really, really cautious about how they spend their money, where they spend it, and what the prices are. I see a lot of people becoming Costco members. The only thing that stopped me from doing it is I don't currently have anywhere to store all of this stuff. But if I can get a place in my apartment where I can store large things of toilet paper or canned goods or stuff, I'll be joining Costco, because for me to go grocery shopping every week or every 2 weeks is really not cheap.
Right. And it's not unfortunately, it's not just the groceries, it's also the utilities. As we've spoken about, the water bills have gone up by 9%. PGW raised the rates, the electric company raised the rates, and SEPTA just raised fares by 21%. It's really an attack on the working people of the United States. And I'm shocked that nobody is really talking about this in a way that makes any sense. It's all the things that you mentioned, Denise. It's also the concentration of ownership of all the meat packing plants. They're all owned by a handful of corporations. All the egg processing is owned by a handful of people. The government has allowed many of these industries to consolidate, to violate antitrust laws, and therefore they can manipulate the market. Yes, the drought creates a problem, but prices go up, and as you're pointing out, they never go back down to where they were. The best example is eggs. Yes, the egg prices went up because of the bird flu, but the bird flu's over, the egg production's back up, and yet the eggs remain at a much higher level than they were before the bird flu. And that's because of the consolidation of the egg industry.
So when was the last time that you remember prices being this high and this out of whack with what people can actually afford?
Actually, in terms of groceries, it was shortly before the 2008 elections. I remember I walked into a grocery store. It was the old Pathmark in South Philadelphia on Oregon Avenue. And I walked in thinking, okay, I don't have a lot of money, but we got to eat. What can I do? I can usually get chicken. Chicken is usually economical. It doesn't cost that much. I walked into the grocery store thinking, okay, I'll get some chicken wings. I'll make some chicken wings and French fries, and we'll have that. I picked up the package of chicken wings. Now, these were fresh chicken wings. They weren't like pre-breaded or anything. They were just fresh chicken wings that I could, cut into pieces and fry up and serve. $17 for a pack of chicken wings. And I'm like, do the chickens fly to my house? Do they cut themselves? And, do they create their own sauces? Why am I paying $17 for not wings, not thighs, not legs? I am paying this for chicken wings. And, I was like, my God, this is ridiculous. I mean, for a while there, a lot of us were going to dollar stores and hitting the grocery section there because, believe it or not, a lot of your dollar stores like Dollar Tree and Dollar General and they're not quite $1 anymore. They're like more like $1.25, but they have freezer cases. And while the stuff isn't necessarily the best quality, you're not going to see it at a place like Wegmans or anything, you can still make a meal out of it. There were a lot of times from between 2000 and 2008 where I got really good at making spaghetti and meatballs from stuff I got at the dollar store. And but unfortunately, the dollar stores don't have that kind of selection anymore. The closest you might be able to get is Aldi, but sometimes even Aldi is a little pricey for people who could use that break. And if folks keep putting tariffs on stuff, this only stands to get worse.
One of the amazing things to me is that when Trump was running, he blamed Biden for the inflation, and his people blamed Biden for the inflation. And now the food prices continue to escalate, and no one's blaming Trump. It's so bad in terms of politics that the Trump administration's response to the rise in food prices is to cut back on SNAP, make it harder and harder for people to qualify for SNAP.
Yeah.
And that's going to continue to be a huge issue. The subsidies for healthcare. Now, I know we call it Obamacare, whatever you want to call it. The subsidies that allow people, Americans, to actually have healthcare, which of course is something across the rest of the world is everybody has. Those subsidies are under attack. And yet somehow the population is unwilling to look at President Trump and say, well, wait a minute, when you were running, you said the food prices were Biden's responsibility. Now, how come they're not yours? Why are you making it harder for people to buy health insurance? Why are you making it harder for people to put food on their table? And these are the political issues that I really wish the Democrats would be talking about and other people would be talking about, how hard it is to be a working person in America right now.
Right now, and it's funny that you bring up the health care subsidies. The health care subsidies are why the government has not passed a budget, why stopgap funding has not been passed to keep the government running, because you had the Republicans were like, we want to cut this. And in a rare show of no, the Democrats have said, no, we're not going to allow you to pass this. We're not going to allow you to take people off of their health insurance. And while that is appreciated, it doesn't, the bottom line is, and I said this morning, and I know it kind of felt like I may have come off a little cavalier by saying this, but elections have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the consequences that we're seeing right now is food has gotten ridiculously high. 2, gas prices are probably going to start sneaking back up. 3, you have people who are wondering, why they can't get what they need. And, there's all sorts of things that are going on that right now are probably the best example I can come up with of elections having consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's time that folks just, come right out and say elections have consequences.
Yeah.
So when this group of people comes around and tries to, tell you that, this is why this is happening to you, you need to remind them that you all are the ones in charge. And because you're the ones in charge, this is kind of your monkeys and your circus.
Now, sticking with the consumer affairs segment here, Lance, you had a couple of things that you've been following too.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about SEPTA because I think at this point, most people know that SEPTA did receive a flex from the governor. And what that meant was a couple of things. One is that SEPTA had not been straightforward about telling us that they could send a letter to the governor and ask for the capital funds to be flexed for the operating funds. And that was $396 million flexed. Now, the significance to me, of course, is, and I don't want to get too obsessed with it, is that SEPTA had all along been telling us that they can't do this. But in the letter dated September 8th from the Secretary of Transportation to SEPTA, the Secretary of Transportation is quoting SEPTA saying, as stated in your letter, section 427.6, parens B of the department's regulations allow the use with departmental approval of capital assistance funds for operating assistance for 1 year to prevent one or more of the following: to prevent a reduction in service, to prevent an unreasonable fare increase, to prevent a projected one-time unbalanced operating budget. So SEPTA knew about this well in advance and didn't tell anyone, wouldn't let anyone ask about this. But when the court said you have to put the buses back on the road, then they used this clause and they wrote to the governor and they asked that the money be flexed. But what continues to be troubling is they got $394 million in capital dollars flexed to operating dollars. What that means is this money was set aside not for any current project, but for projects at some point in the future. And now instead of using it for that, they're going to use it for operating. But it's supposed to be for 2 years. Now, here's where the math gets a little crazy. The SEPTA says that what they're facing is a $213 million structural deficit. So you take that for 2 years, it's $426 million. They got 394, but what they didn't talk about, and what everybody who follows this knows, is that any increase in state funding has to be matched by local funding. There's a 15% requirement. So SEPTA is going to get the 394 million, and they're also going to get an additional 60 million. So the total amount they're going to get is 454 million. They need 426 million. So they're going to get $30 million more than what they need, which leads me to suggest that they're actually projecting the fare increase is going to lose money. I know it sounds wild, but here's what happens. People, as Denise was talking about, look for ways to save money. And if you have, as Senator Hughes pointed out, a 30% fare increase in the course of 1 year. 9 months ago, SEPTA raised the fares. They raised the fares this month. So a 30% fare increase, people forgo rides. They don't get on as much. They don't take another trip. They don't visit. They do whatever they can to survive. And sometimes what that means is not taking SEPTA trips. Excuse me. So we know from past experience, whenever you raise fares, you get fewer riders. What we don't know is what happens when you have a 30% fare increase, because nobody's ever tried such a large fare increase before. So as a result, we don't know whether it's going to be more money coming in or less money coming in. But it appears that what SEPTA is saying is they don't expect any additional money. At the next board meeting, which will be the third Thursday in October, we should start to see the first numbers of how many fewer riders they have. And we should get a sense of what's happening, unless Senator Hughes is successful in his attempt to get the fare increase rolled back. So just wanted to talk about that. Also, again, in terms of worst possible news, what Denise was talking about, car insurance is going to continue to go up. One of the things people don't necessarily recognize is when we have the tariffs on raw material, that means that if your car is unfortunately in an accident and you need a new fender, a new bumper, a new whatever, it's going to cost you more. And car insurance companies are not in business to help us. I mean, you know, they can tell us they're good neighbors. They could tell us they're good hands. They could tell us they don't have mascots, or they could tell us whatever they want. But here's the thing. These companies are in business to make money. And when their costs go up, they're going to raise the price of car insurance, because it's one of those things which you have to have. So it's really that simple. Insurance, like the mortgage companies, have a great scam going. The law says you have to have car insurance, and if the car insurance goes up, your choice is don't drive or pay more. So that's another hidden cost of the tariffs. As Denise was talking about, getting the fresh fruit from Mexico, from Canada has a lot of hydropower. They grow a lot of hydroponics. All of that costs more, and all of it will continue to cost more.
Go ahead, Denise.
It's just, you know, Lance is right that a lot of this is going to continue to cost more. And yet you have people you have like large chunks of the federal government that are not going to be paid because because the folks in Washington can't seem to get their heads together and come up with a budget. So it's going to be some nastiness going on for a little bit. And, you know, this is just in time for America's 250th anniversary, which, you know, it's going to be nuts.
Now, Lance, something I want to get back to here, the potential of the fare hike to further diminish ridership to the point where they actually start to lose money on it. Doesn't SEPTA hire maybe an actuary or somebody who looks at this and says, hey, at a certain point, we could have a problem here?
The fare increase is at such a high level, nobody knows.
Okay.
Actuaries are pretty good when they have good data. And I wouldn't say it was be an actuary, but you're right. People who follow this, they have spreadsheets. They say, well, in Detroit, we did this, and in Cleveland, we did that, and in Atlanta, we did this. And we have all of this data. What does a 10% increase do? What does a 12% increase do? No transit system has ever had a 30% increase in a year. So we don't know. Excuse me.
Well, and you also have the concern of where SEPTA got that money from. They got it from a fund that was supposed to pay for improvements to the system. A couple of weeks ago, I was covering an event, And Larry had to come and take me home because there was a fire in the tunnel in one of the SEPTA tunnels, and it backed up train traffic, regional rail traffic for hours. In fact, and this is something that, folks really need to keep an eye on. While there were cuts in service that were supposed to be restored, there have been other cuts made. Like, for example, the last regional rail train that will take you from Philadelphia to Wilmington on weekdays leaves at 7:30. If the 10:30 train that used to take you from Philadelphia to Wilmington has been cut, it goes as far as Marcus Hook now.
Mm-hmm.
So that is interesting, as you pointed out. The governor of Delaware came up with the money to get the train to go there. I wonder why he's accepting that. Maybe we can get a call into him and ask.
Maybe. I'm not sure he knows, because I didn't know. I found out the hard way.
Yeah.
You got off in Marcus Hook?
Well, no, I found out the hard way because I came into Jefferson Station, looking for the train, looking for the, wait for my 10:30 train. And it said, oh, well, the 10:30 train only goes as far as Marcus Hook now, and it's not running at all tonight because of the fire.
Well, right. The fire is the fire, but that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's acceptable to have fires. I'm just saying that's different than a planned stop.
Yeah, but they said it no longer goes to Wilmington after 7:30.
We should try and get the governor of Delaware to explain that to us.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that we wanted to talk a little bit about what all of the budget impasse mean. And really politically, what does it mean when the state of Pennsylvania can't pass a budget and the federal government can't pass a budget? What does that say about our state of politics?
Well, you have, and this is something that I've been noticing, just from covering presidential politics over the last 2 or 3 election cycles. You have people who have gotten elected to office for the purpose of not actually governing. And that's kind of the problem right now. You have the people who don't actually want to govern are the ones running things.
Yeah.
And because they don't want to govern, they just want to, get elected and basically tear things up. That's kind of where that's kind of where we are right now. And unfortunately, with the federal shutdown, because you can file for unemployment, with your state if you are a federal employee and you're furloughed, you're going to have an unemployment system that is already, understaffed and underperforming, getting hit with more people who need help. So particularly in Pennsylvania, since we don't have a budget, it's going to be really interesting to see what that looks like, what that turns into.
And I want to be clear about what's happening at the federal level. And, what we're really talking about here is the Republicans are pretty close to accurate when they say this is the same continuing resolution that was passed 6 months ago that the Democrats supported. That stands up to scrutiny. What doesn't, however, is when the Republicans come out, and I watched the White House press briefing today. Every chance they could, the press secretary and the vice president of the United States lied and said the Democrats want to give health care to illegal immigrants. That was their terminology. They said it so many times that it was almost comical. And the truth of it is that that's not what's in the Democrats' bill. I've read the entire thing. I read the entire thing today. And not once is anything in there that's mentioned. What the Democrats want to do is restore the Medicaid funding and make sure that the ACA enhanced subsidies remain in place, because at the end of the year, they go away. And the estimates I saw, and they mostly agree because I looked at a couple studies and a couple in-depth news reports, ACA premiums will go up by 114% for the average person. 114%, double, more than double what they're paying now. And the Republicans are saying, well, we have time to deal with that. Well, you know what? The Democrats are saying, we don't really trust you to get this done. So we want it done now. And we want all that Medicaid funding put back in because this is unconscionable. That's people are going to die because of this. That's what's going to happen. So when the Republicans come out and say, well, they're trying to get undocumented people health care, that's not the case. It's illegal for somebody who's undocumented to apply for any of these programs. So it's not even disingenuous. It's an outright lie that they're trying to tell people, and people believe it because the Democrats are inept at rebuttal. But
and I do think we ought to recognize what a great con artist President Trump is.
Yeah,
he holds a press conference saying, "I'm lowering drug prices,"
and that's not what's going to happen.
Well, but even we're all in favor of that. But while at the same time, he's going to double the price people have to pay for health insurance. So who's going to write the prescriptions?
Yeah. Yeah. And just a note about that, because I looked into this extensively as well today. What's really happening with that deal with Pfizer, first of all, the details aren't out yet. So nobody really knows what this is going to look like. But the examples of the medication they gave, they are expensive medications. But if you already have health insurance, you're not going to see any change. You're not going to be any cheaper. It's going to be the same amount. People on Medicaid get them at a reduced rate anyway. So the only way that these medications become cheaper, if this goes through, is if you're just buying it out of pocket, which I don't think a lot of people do for these things. I don't know. I don't know for sure. But I just want that to be clear, too, because the early indications to me suggest this plan with Pfizer doesn't mean anything. So I just want to, I don't know.
Well, I think that's pretty much the case almost with all the promises he makes, right? Mm-hmm. The war in Ukraine will be over within 24 hours.
Yeah.
He's got a peace plan that doesn't include the Palestinians.
Yeah.
It's all, it's a great con, but it doesn't really amount to anything for regular people.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Naval Federal Credit Union was ordered to make refunds to its members by the old Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Trump's person who he's put there, who is part of writing that report, has decided that those refunds are inappropriate. So he's sticking it to armed forces.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just one of those incredible things where he keeps talking about how important it is and how we're going to make the military strong. And at the same time, he's stealing from them. He's allowing the Navy Federal Credit Union to take advantage of its own members.
Yeah.
Wait, well, I'm a member of Navy Federal Credit Union, so I kind of take that personally. But the thing is, this is the second time that he's been disrespectful to the military this week. So,
well, yeah, and I mean, it's the same thing. I like people who weren't captured. Mocking John McCain, who actually, for everything else he actually was captured and Purple Heart, and I think that's a pretty common thing here for Trump and Trump supporters just sort of laugh it off. That's not what he really meant. That, it's really astounding to me that not only have people tied their, and we're getting a little off topic here, but I'll just say it because I think this all the time. The Trump supporters have intertwine their own personalities with Trump so much that they can't separate now. It would almost be like losing an organ or something. They just can't do it. It's so much of who they are now. And that's pathetic, really, in my opinion. But what are you going to tell these people? It's just sad. It's just sad. So, but what I still believe is that you can't believe this rhetoric. You can't, accept the fact that the Republicans are telling you this when in fact there's no evidence that the Democrats are trying to give undocumented people federal benefits. That's just not what's happening. They're lying about it. So that needs to be very clear here. That's what's really going on.
So why do you think that the state can't come up with a budget and the federal government can't come up with a budget? What happened to the old days where there was quote unquote horse trading, where people recognized that there were legitimate differences of opinion and worked together? Is Denise saying the case that the Grover Norquist Republicans have won, that they just want to end government?
Yes. That's part of it, because they don't want to give out any wins to the other side, because then it looks like they're not trying to drown government in the bathtub, like Grover Norquist used to say. What they're trying to do is appeal to this right-wing base that wants any program for anybody who isn't, a white person to not exist anymore. They don't want these things. So that's what we're dealing with here. And I think it's ossified to the point where Republicans can't extricate themselves from this. They just have to be this now. This is just what they are.
And there's also a certain level of fear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain level of fear of actually, if you are seen as actually trying to govern, to trying to find compromise and common ground and all of those things, then these people who are hardcore MAGA folks, people who are actually being the most adversely impacted by everything that's going on and don't realize it. These are the people that will say, well, you're not supporting the president. You're not giving him, enough support, and we're going to throw you out. And the one thing that I've learned about politicians over the years is that the only thing they like better than a first term is a second term. And no one wants to actually have to go out and get a real job. Because let's face it, if you compare what they do in Congress to the ditch digging, teaching, or military service that many of the folks in Congress have performed, they would rather not have to go back to something so arduous anymore.
Yeah.
But it's sad because, like I said, the people who are the most impacted by this are the very people who are going to the rallies and cheering the loudest because they think, or at least they thought when they voted, that this wasn't going to impact them, that this was going to impact other people. And what they're finding out is, no, it's going to get you too. And in some cases, really, really badly. What people don't understand is that now that the federal government has shut down, sure, Social Security payments are going to be processed. Sure, Medicaid is going to be paid out. But you don't know for how long. And you don't know if the people who are being asked to do this while not getting paid are going to stick with it. I just saw an alert on my computer about TSA workers and how, despite the fact that TSA is a very much needed service, because you can't get on the plane without the TSA folks patting you down, and you definitely can't get on the plane unless the air traffic controllers are working. You now have a situation where you could possibly have people canceling flights because they don't know what they're going to get.
And, I want to be clear about that too. TSA workers had their collective bargaining rights almost completely stripped and destroyed, which I think is blatantly illegal. But,
well, you have two government unions that are suing the Trump administration because Trump, before the shutdown happened, he went to all of his department heads and said, I want you to come up with a mass layoff plan.
yeah.
And because of that, you have, people that he's talking about just cutting their jobs for no other reason but he feels like doing it. And the thing is, it's going to be departments that the president has already decided that he doesn't like. EPA is probably gone. Environmental protection is probably gone. Department of Education, what's left of it, will be gutted. There are other, programs and things. I wouldn't be surprised if the Department of Housing and Urban Development were done away with on some level.
They're already cutting housing subsidies.
Right. So, we're looking at a situation where, basically folks are going to make a whole lot of situations that were already pretty foul worse. And in places like Pennsylvania that don't have a budget of their own yet, things are good that's going to exacerbate that problem.
So in Pennsylvania, we're looking at at least we have a city budget.
Right. We have a city budget. And what should scare all of us is that the city of Philadelphia was more efficient than the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the federal government. That should scare everyone, because when Philadelphia is more efficient than you are, that says a lot about your
Denise,
efficiency.
we spend a lot of time in and around local government, which we love. Local government's our thing. But no, you're right. I mean, because and the other thing too is when you look at local government and how unwieldy it can be. The city government's extensive. It's 25,000 people. When you put it all together. But times that by 10 or whatever, that's what the state government is, and times that by 1,000, and that's what the federal government is.
Right. There are 100,000 federal employees in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing. And so these are the things that we have to keep track on. We're going to learn more about what these cuts and potential cuts and without having a federal budget, what that's going to mean here in the city. I don't expect to see ramifications right away. I don't think it's going to be immediate, but if we come back next week on the show and we're still in that situation, that's when we're going to have to get serious about like what's going to happen here and how are we preparing for this.
And what folks need to recognize is that one of the things that Philadelphia prides itself on is tourism. And a big chunk of Independence Mall is going to be unavailable. Because of what's happening federally.
And this is a nice time to visit when the weather's cooler. And all right, well, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you, as always, Denise and Lance Haver. And we will be back next week with Kendra Brooks, Minority Leader Kendra Brooks, to join us. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.